Hello, I'm Amanda Thompson and this is the Good People Podcast.
It's a tip of the cap, it's a pat on the back, it's a smile from ear to ear. They're the good people from round here.
Yes, welcome to another episode of the Good People Podcast, the podcast where I get to chat to the good people from around here, as the song suggests. They come in all shapes and sizes, and some of them have done some pretty amazing things, and today's guest fits into that category. She is an award-winning financial advisor, a keynote speaker. She's qualified 3 times for the World Ironman Championships and is on a mission to break down the gender biases that get in the way of men and women achieving their potential. Welcome to the podcast, Amanda Thompson.
Thank you. I'm still grooving a little bit from that intro.
Yeah, I know. It's a deliberate thing. We try and set the scene with some appropriate good people music on our way into the show. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, I'm following in great steps. I listen carefully and I'm privileged to be here.
Oh, no, you definitely qualify to come on this show. Just to give people who don't know who you are a little bit of context, you've won a few awards, Australian Small Business Award for Finance. You won a Gold Stevie Award for helping women in the women category, women helping women. And you're up against some big players there, IBM, Konica Minolta.
Yep, that was a good one to win.
That was a great one to win. And then you're a finalist in the Women Changing the World finalist. You're finalist in that category as well. This is unreal. And also, not to mention that, you're going to speak in Paris shortly. You're going to Paris to speak. Tell us about that.
Yes, I'm going to the World Venture Capital Summit in Paris in 2 weeks or just over 2 weeks, and I get to have a voice for women in that space.
Right. You're speaking at the Australian Embassy.
Yes.
And also the World Venture Capital Summit.
Yeah.
So busy trip. When's that? When are you doing that?
2 weeks from today, I'll be over in London.
Right, 2 weeks today for the time of this recording. So by the time we hear this episode, you'll be there dominating.
Hopefully, having a voice for Australian women and all women, actually. Yeah.
There you go. Well, good luck with that trip. Obviously, again, by the time people hear this, you'll already be there. So we can't remind you to pack your toothbrush and all the things that you need. Tell me, right, you've always been someone who described yourself as rebelling against the mainstream.
Yep.
Right. So we used to flick back. You're a financial advisor from big bank from big bank land. What do you mean by going against the mainstream?
Oh, so for everyone listening, they've probably got their views on a financial planner, and chances are a lot of us have come across corporate financial planning or the mainstream financial planning that the banks offer. I delve a little bit further into that, so rebel against what the textbooks necessarily tell us to do and add my own little, let's say, spark or feminine touch, so that a real emotional connection to my clients, which can be good and bad for me when you take your work home every day.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But so I rebel against it, try and provide accessible and affordable advice to everyone as opposed to having to tick boxes.
What's so important to you about the accessibility, though, of the financial advice?
There's so many people that think, I don't need a financial planner, I'm not getting old enough yet. So we assimilate financial planning to insurances and superannuation generally. But there's so much more to setting yourself up for a financially free future or personal goals, comfort, confidence, just day to day with your money or what you can do when you run a small business. So small business women in particular, COVID as well, the increase in women running their own businesses has spiked, but yet the financial literacy or the financial confidence that goes with running your own business hasn't spiked at the same level. And what we find is that within 1 to 2 years, the figures still show that 90% of small businesses still go under, and the number one cause is often cash flow, or so therefore a lack of finances.
Yeah. Right. So, and I didn't realise there was an increase in women run businesses.
Yeah, it's actually it's. I don't have the exact stats, so I won't pretend. Or
sure.
I could sit here and say it confidently, and you'll probably believe me.
Yeah, I would.
But I think that more and more women are starting to take that step into, at first, flexibility. You know, mothers in particular, flexibility around working when we become mums and not having to meet that still 9 to 5 mentality, so we can feel successful in that part of our life, as well as still bringing an income into our families.
Yeah, because it's an extra challenge, and also, like, there's some pretty ordinary statistics around women and finance too, isn't there? Like,
we could be here for a whole podcast, but shall I quote some really poignant ones?
Give us some big ones.
So, women retire with over 40%, so more than 40% less than our male counterparts, even though statistically we still live longer. So it's nearing on 50% less.
Right. So you've got less and you live longer, so you've got less to keep you going.
Yep, you're doing the sums.
Yeah.
We talk about me going to Paris for the Venture Capital Summit, and again, women-led businesses in Australia receive less than 4% of the funding available for startups.
Right.
Where else can our lovely Prime Minister only came out probably 2 weeks ago confirming that women earn 87 cents to every dollar that a man earns in Australia. And the big one, the scary one, I think for, I'm looking, we're sitting here as the same generation, Andy, but it's the 55-year-old plus women are the largest and fastest growing demographic of homelessness in Australia.
Yeah, I actually recently heard about that one, and it's unbelievable. Like, it's really shattering to think that you can, you're 55 plus, you've lived a long time, you've contributed. A lot of these people have paid tax for a very long time, and all of a sudden you're kind of left in a spot where you just have nowhere to go.
It is, and it really highlights the importance of strong, specific financial advice. And I'm not saying financial planning advice, just in general, financial advice and taking control of your own finances, because, we'll probably talk about this a little bit later on, but we are playing catch up. As women, in particular in Australia, we're paying generational catch-up. So if you think back to your parents, grandparents, chances are the woman didn't work, for one, because they stayed at home. We didn't need 2 incomes like we do now to pay mortgages. Women take career breaks to have children, and the cost of that, especially on a superannuation balance, is huge. It wasn't until 1960, here's a little fact for you, 1962 that women were actually allowed to work after getting married. So prior to 1962, there were only certain occupations that once you got married as a female, you could continue in your work.
These just seem like, it just feels like it can't be real.
Because it's not that long ago, is it? 1962.
Well, it's my parents, lived... Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're getting somewhere, although we haven't closed the gap yet. We've got a long way to go there. How about your household growing up?
So my household growing up was a single parent household. My mum was one of those women that took career break when she was married with kids. Unfortunately, my mum had an accident, so couldn't follow her career path of nursing, and then so went back to teaching. So, those two very strong female-orientated employment. And when it was just mum, she was so determined to provide for my brother and I continually saw her go without, like so many of us do. We put our kids first to this day.
Yep.
I remember a conversation when I was young with my mum saying, why don't you just go and buy yourself something, mum? And she was like, well, she gave me some figures that seemed like a lot in that day and age, saying that she had $100 a fortnight to survive on after all expenses were paid. And, back then $100 seemed like so much money, but we're sitting here today thinking, I understand just how little $100 takes us. And then another conversation, she was just so adamant on paying off her home loan. And she said to me one day, I just want to pay that off because I don't have a lot in superannuation. one of the women that didn't work for a long time.
Yes.
So the house is all your brother and you are going to have. And so that's just the pure selflessness of my mum, in that she was thinking of, you know, I suppose an estate planning concept of leaving us money in her death, as opposed to really focusing on what her financial future was going to be like. So she's lucky that I'm now an awesome financial advisor and she is set. But I wish I could have done it a lot sooner for her.
Yeah, I know. And not just an awesome like you're an award-winning.
Oh, okay.
You're an award-winning financial advisor now. I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that. And I think there's a lot of people who can relate to the older, that sort of 50s, 60s, 70s almost, where they weren't working a lot and don't have that. So now we're in a situation where we've got people who are lacking in that great financial advice or retirement plans that they probably need, which causes, I think, a lot of people to try and work harder. And I know that you yourself have experienced as someone, you've gone through a period where you tried to work harder.
That was a nice gentle lead into this conversation,
do you
isn't
want to
it?
explain how working harder worked out for you at the time?
Oh, so unfortunately for me, I too became a single mum. And when my marriage ended after 12 years, I still wanted to power ahead and tick all these, boxes of being the super mum, the super financial advisor, the super everything. And what I didn't realise until the day I found myself in intensive care was that I was working myself into an early grave. And I am one of the lucky ones that did, I suppose, survive that scare, but not 4 weeks in hospital and a very good reality check of just how hard I was working. And also, I suppose, when we talk about the corporate world, just how brutal that corporate world is, that really they couldn't have cared less if I wasn't there the next day. All they were worried about was the shareholders of their businesses, and yet I was taking on every client as if they were my family. So it was a reality check in terms of my health, but also a reality check on how I wanted to do the job that I love so much.
Yeah, right. So and that was, I guess, what helped you go out on your own to create financial advice that was a bit more, less cookie cutter, more specific to individual.
It took a while. I mean, when you have a heart attack at age 33,
right,
it takes a while to get to the place where I
had a heart attack.
Yeah, the doctors were surprised that I survived the night.
Moly.
My ECG went around all the teaching hospitals in Australia.
Wowee.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lesson, folks. Working yourself to the bone can cause heart attacks. That's unreal. I didn't know that part. That's amazing that you were able to claw back from there.
Yeah.
Also amazing, clawing back from there. Also amazing, especially with heart conditions, is that you've qualified 3 times as a world Ironman championship contender. So that enables you to compete, right?
Yep.
First, I want to come back to that as well, but do you want to tell us what got you into Ironman in the first place? I mean, we've gone financial advice to Ironman, which it's quite different.
But it's not. That's what I base my business on, is I can turn a financial conversation into anything about Lycra or vice versa. So hence, endurance financial, put 2 and 2 together. And the other thing I wanted to note is that, here I am talking about equality and gender equality. Ironman's a brand, so there's no such thing as Iron Woman. So for all the ladies listening going, she's not spruiking the right thing, Ironman is actually a brand.
It's a brand.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have to, and I'm okay with that. I compete in a brand that is called Ironman, and lots of women do that.
Yep.
But when I cross that line, I do get called Amanda Thompson, you are an Ironman.
Yep.
Triathlon. So it's a funny story with not so funny twist to it. I had always loved sport, and I knew some people that did triathlon, and I had been, as a joke, given a half Ironman entry for my birthday.
Right. There's a gift.
Yep. Challenge. And I hadn't done the event yet, and when I was out watching an Ironman one day, the Melbourne Ironman, a couple of days beforehand, I got diagnosed with melanoma.
Oh.
And so it's kind of hits keep coming. That was at age, so at 33, I have a heart attack. 34, I'm diagnosed with melanoma. And I didn't like it. I didn't like having something that was completely out of my control. So, in all of my infinite wisdom, I thought, well, training for an Ironman's in my control. And so the next day I signed up for an Ironman, even without knowing what that diagnosis was actually going to entail. And little did I know, because it was in my leg, that I'd be off my feet for quite some time in terms of the ability to train. But we did it, and my girls were there at the end, and it was all worthwhile. But it was definitely an adventure, and Ironman training brought a lot more to my life than I would ever have expected.
Oh, yeah? How do you mean?
Oh, gee. If you've heard one of my keynotes is actually called Life Lessons Learned in Lycra. And for me, one of the biggest lessons that I learnt was you've got to deal with your trauma in your life. And I remember being absolutely exhausted after a run one day, and just really physically exhausted, which, led to mental and emotional exhaustion. And I just, I had this semi-breakdown about not being able to finish a training session. I mean, I was physically wrecked.
Yeah.
And then all of these memories of mine started flooding back, and trying to claw my way into why I was choosing to do this. And for me, having a really good look in the mirror was important, and it took training for an Ironman to recover or start to heal from a trauma that I'd suffered 20 years prior, and that was while out running on the edge of a primary school, not 500 metres from my home. I got brutally and sexually attacked, which left me very broken, but also, again, in what has been deemed Amanda fashion, I just got up the next day and got on with it, but never really took the time to figure out just the effect that it had on me. And on this particular day of training, I think I cried and cried and cried more than I ever had. And it was because of something that had happened 20 years ago. And the guilt, all these silly emotions that you shouldn't feel, but I did. So I had to process a lot of that. But when you're riding a bike for 5-6 hours on your own, you've got plenty of time to assess all of that.
To think.
Yeah.
And so that you've talked about using the triathlon to help you deal with these traumas, and I mean, that's 20 years after that you're now launching yourself into extreme physical challenges. Like, I've seen these things. My brother did a half down at Geelong a year or two ago. He's done a few, but you just watch the people. These people they're either superhuman, but also they're exhausted. Like, that's serious.
And add crazy. There is a little bit of cray-cray to what we do. Trust me. Yeah. You've either got friends that understand your craziness and support you, or there's friends that don't understand your craziness, but they'll support you anyway and still think you're the craziest person.
Yeah. Do you think if it wasn't triathlons, it'd be something else?
Look, I can't tell you that, because it was just, I think there would have been a big, straight bang into a brick wall somewhere along the line. I'm glad it was doing something like that. I'm glad that I was surrounded at the time by new friends as well. So, making friends in your late 30s and 40s that'll be lifelong friends is a really amazing experience. So triathlon's brought some really cool learnings as well.
Yeah. And also you were saying that, like, you had to, through all this training, like, you had to have melanoma cut out of you, which meant that your leg was not as functional as it should be normally.
Yep.
And then you've still managed to get yourself up to a point where you've qualified for the world.
I didn't in that year, though. Like, it's taken a while. Don't spook me too much. I
was getting too amazed. But
to finish, I mean, my kids were quite young. So they were 8 and 4 when I did the Ironman.
Uh-huh.
And so even that, it posed its challenges.
Yeah.
How do I get all that training in when I've had the kids most of the time? I was thankful that my mum lived around the corner, but I was also thankful that My kids are quite resilient themselves, and they would have been seen several times out on their bikes while I was pounding the pavement training, and they'd come sometimes to swim squad. And so being able as a woman, and I know I might digress a little bit, but one of the biggest things for me is that those girls saw me commit to something. They were there at the finish line. They saw me complete what I committed to.
Yep.
And showing that you may not be able to be perfect at everything, but you can have it all. You can try it all. I mean, I'll just give my age. I'm mid-40s and I'm still wakeboarding and my girls aren't too embarrassed that mum gets behind the boat and has a go at wakeboarding. And that's really important to me when, and it's just turning Leica into finances, is when I want to stand up and teach my girls in particular how to manage their own finances and find financial freedom and independence, regardless of what their life or where it takes them, to know that they've got the confidence to do that. So I have to lead by example. I have to, walk the walk, so to speak. And so I try and do that in all facets.
And do you have is there something for you that is your secret sauce to keeping on getting up? Like, you've had a few occasions where you've had to pull yourself up again.
Yeah. Again, it's another podcast all in itself to tell you about my amazing grandfather who was completely blind, but to tick off a couple of his amazing achievements, he became a barrister, passed the bar back in the day with no eyesight. Him and his mate invented and created cricket for the blind, football for the blind.
Oh, wow.
My mum has a scrapbook full of newspaper articles about him. And so, he got on with life with a disability, but you wouldn't think he had one at all. And so if ever I have to stop and say, poor Amanda, feel sorry for yourself, I only have to look back at my heritage.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky that the legacy of being strong and knowing there are people worse in the world that are worse off in the world than you is something that drives me. But also I believe in stories, which is why I'm here telling you some of mine today. It only takes one story to resonate with one person that could help them going through whatever it is that they're going through.
Yeah, I agree. That's the exact reason we want to tell these stories. And it seems as though if you dig deep enough, most people have a story.
Everyone has a story.
They might not be front page paper newsworthy, but they'll be the story of how they, the formation, how they got to where they are. And I think that's amazing. Can we look up your grandfather?
No, he's that old. So he has a park named after him out in Strathmore, so the KT Smith Reserve. Okay. So you'll be able to find some, but it's all, what's it, microfiche? Is it all that microfiche film probably? We are really talking. He's got seats named after him. He's got scholarships, Lions Club scholarships named after him. I remember his funeral and there were several streets closed down because that many people attended the funeral. Right. They had to have police directing traffic around the funeral parlour in North Melbourne. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Very amazing.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Now, also exciting news for you. You've got a couple of books in the works.
I do, and in the works. I hit send. On financially fit women, and it's.
When did you do that?
8:00 this morning.
Right.
So it is in production. There is a launch party in Yarraville planned. And so that book will be able to be in people's hands very shortly.
What's the crux of it?
Oh, everything I believe in. So for the cost of a book, you'll be able to get my general. So obviously I have to be really careful of what type of advice I give, but it's kind of like your financial planning guide in your hand. So anything that you want to know about financial planning, from superannuations to insurance to estate planning to cash flow, but even setting goals, achieving goals, celebrating goals, some little business secrets in there, and all for the price of a book, which is really, really important to me. We started off this conversation by saying having accessible information and affordable information. And I mean, maybe this book will build the confidence in women in particular. I mean, men can read it. It's just because it's called Financially Fit Women. It's not, it's not gender specific. Yeah. It might just give the confidence to go and seek further help and know that you're not alone and that your story is not so bad or there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And what was the other book?
Haven't got a name for it yet.
Oh,
but
okay. Should we name it now?
Oh, no, 'cause it'll have to have something to do with my grandfather, and it will be some form of lessons learned against, as we've touched upon, some of the adversity that I've faced. So it's not so much a memoir. I don't know whether, I don't like the idea of a memoir, and I'm only midlife, so we'll have to think of exactly what it is. I'm planning to live a lot longer than this to be my only story.
Yeah, okay. Smith, the lessons of Smith.
There'll be something. It might have something to do with an owl. My mum told me that owls are,
like the bird, an owl.
The owl, yep. So if you resonate that with my grandfather, they very wise and can see in the dark.
Ah, okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So no working title just yet, but we'll keep an eye out for that one as well.
Hey, feel free. Look, can we send in any suggestions to
there
your?
You go. Put it in the
yeah.
comments. What you think the name of Amanda's next book should be called? Actually, it'd be pretty funny. We named our the coffee that we sell. We got the community to name that.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's good fun. Actually, both our Christmas one and our regular one that we do. It's always interesting to see what people come up with. So you don't know. Maybe Smith's Seat.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Anything else on the cards coming up? I mean, Paris, is that enough? Or
I've got to start getting back into racing again. So I still, I hopefully will say 4-time qualified.
Oh, yeah. That's good. And what do you have to do to qualify? What's that mean?
So you've got to race for one, and you've got to be up the top of your game. So there is only a certain amount of spots per race available. So unless you're in that top handful. It's probably one of the benefits of being a female is that there's still not as many females competing in triathlon as men, so it's a little less competitive. But
there's an athlete gap.
Yes, there is. A triathlon are actually, so Ironman, the brand, is still trying to build that now by having women's races and specific encouragements to the women in tri, which is good.
Right. Would they consider changing their brand name?
Who knows? But just on gender, triathlon is this amazing sport because I'd love you to stop for a minute and think about what other sport there is that you can be training, but more so racing at the one time against old, young, male, female, pros, age groupers. So it's actually a really cool diversification when you're out there on the course.
Yeah, it's pretty inclusive.
So again, there you go. See, lycra, business, Amanda, finance, it all.
Oh, there you go. I'm surprised you're not in the lycra today for podcasting.
Pressing send on the book this morning, so I have to train this afternoon.
Didn't write it on the way. Hey, look, thanks so much for coming on. It's such an amazing story. I wish you all the best with your launch.
Thank you.
Of the
You'll
book.
be there, I hope.
Oh, I'll be there. I'll go to the opening of an envelope at the moment. So, post-COVID, I'm keen to get out there.
It's a bit like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's local. We're supporting, you and I are all for supporting our locals. So I'm
absolutely.
very big on having any events in our local community to support those businesses as well.
Well, award-winning financial advisor Amanda Thompson and World Ironman champion qualifier. It's too many things to list here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope maybe we can check in with you again in the future and see how it all went, especially if you're coming up to a race. That'd be good.
When are you going to have someone interview you on the Good People podcast?
Oh, I don't know yet. Maybe that could be a while away.
Oh, there. Note that one down.
Could be a while. I don't know if my story's good enough.
Oh, you won an award not recently, did you?
True. Yes, that's true. But yeah, well, we'll see. We'll chalk it up for one day, maybe the 100th episode or something like that.
You've figured out that I'm pretty gung ho when I believe in things. Haven't
Yeah,
you?
well, you I'm sure you won't let me forget it either. So, Amanda Thompson, thanks so much for your time today. Good luck with all your training and your book and all your bits. And I hope that you can help with your goals of helping people achieve their financial freedoms.
Fitness.
There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you so much. This is the Good People Podcast. I'm Andy. If you want to learn more about it, you can head to iogn.com.au. Please like and subscribe our YouTube videos if you're watching, or if you're listening, sign up to the podcast channels, because it all helps us and we get to keep talking to great people like Amanda. Thanks so much, Amanda. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, Well, it's a tip of the cap, it's a pat on the back, it's a smile from ear to ear. They're the good people from round here. They're the good people from round here. Come on, let me introduce you to a few.